Hello, everyone, and welcome to Big Sam's Long Balls podcast with me, Dan. We are officially on the road to a whopping 100 subscribers. We've just passed the 80 subscriber count, so that's fantastic. Genuinely means an awful lot to me and Chris. So thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to this channel and helping us grow. And sort of have these football podcasts. If you're new to the channel, check us out. Give the video a like if you obviously enjoy the content. Comment down below. The main aim of this channel really is just plenty of interaction from all fan bases. And if you like what you see, subscribe and get involved. So today we are going to be talking about Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel. And are Chelsea in a little bit of trouble right now? And specifically, is Thomas Tuchel in trouble? Could he perhaps be on a bit of borrowed time? That is going to be the topic that we're going to be talking about right now. There is plenty of discussion in the media right now. There's plenty of discussion on social media as well. Is Thomas Tuchel good enough for Chelsea? Should he potentially be sacked? I know that might sound a little bit laughable. We are only 5 games in, but obviously 2 defeats inside his first 5 games, spending a lot of money left, right, and centre under new ownership of Todd Boehly. It's not really the start that Chelsea fans understandably would have wanted. This would have been the season, new owners, loads of money coming in. Let's go and really target Manchester City and hunt them down. And obviously that can still happen. We are, like I said, we're only 5 games in. I personally don't think that Thomas Tuchel should be sacked. Nonetheless, we're going to look at last night's game. We're going to look at this Chelsea team, see if we can sort of fix it, see what needs to really be done. So obviously interaction is the name of the game on this channel. So if you want to get involved, comment down below. I'm not a Chelsea fan or a Southampton fan. We're not going to talk too much about Southampton. I will make that perfectly clear at the beginning of this video. I do apologise, Southampton fans. You know, I do want to say that the job that Ralph Hasenhuttl was doing down on the South Coast is fantastic. Southampton were brilliant last night. It wasn't a fluke victory. It wasn't the case that it was like a jammy goal and, you know, defended for their lives. Southampton deserved this victory, the same that Leeds did when they came up against Chelsea the other week. So worrying signs potentially for Chelsea, fantastic signs for Southampton. So brilliant to Southampton, well done to them. But we are going to be talking more about Chelsea in this video. However, if you are a Southampton fan and you feel that maybe your voices aren't being heard, comment down below or come onto the podcast with me. We'll have a chat. Equally, if you just wanted to make your own video, you can send it to me and I will upload it, of course. So please feel free to get involved in this channel at any time you want. Now then, Chelsea Football Club, they're spending money left, right, and centre. However, Thomas Tuchel doesn't seem happy. Very whiny after games, very critical of his players, very personal as well, talking about them being soft defensively. So they're not really going for it. Maybe suggesting that their heart isn't in it. You know, either way, that is not what footballers will want to hear. Thomas Tuchel obviously has a track record of doing similar things at PSG where it didn't end very well. Most managers don't end very well at PSG, let's be honest. They all end up being sacked there. But are we starting to see history repeat itself a little bit? You know, we're going to look at Thomas Tuchel's man management. Is it as good as what it can be? Are these players really enjoying playing under him? Now, we did a video a couple of weeks ago, and it's worth checking out, by the way. At least in my opinion, it is. And me and Chris did sort of a manager tier list where we sort of ranked every single manager in this Premier League, going from basically Championship at best to the elite, which we obviously called Big Sam. So me and Chris had a little bit of a debate over Thomas Tuchel, and Chris is an Arsenal fan. I'm a Liverpool fan. If you've never seen our channel before. And Chris said he was dubious about him. Maybe it's because he's an Arsenal fan. Maybe it's the rivalry. I don't know. But he said he didn't. It wasn't that he didn't rate him, but he didn't think he was elite. He didn't think he was at the level of, say, a Jurgen Klopp, a Pep Guardiola, and Antonio Conte, and so on. He didn't think he was there. He thought he was a level below that. You know, he was a decent manager, but that was it. I disagreed, however. I disagreed passionately. You know, I feel that this guy is one of the best managers in world football. I think he is an elite level manager. I think he's one of the best in the country. I think he's one of the best in Europe. He's a top manager. And if Liverpool were to part ways with Jurgen Klopp in the next few years, obviously once his contract comes to an end, they will be. If Thomas Tuchel was available, he would be a manager that I'd be happy to see at Anfield. So I rate this guy very, very highly. However, some of the gloss, some of the shine about Thomas Tuchel, I think is starting to sort of fade away. And maybe that just does naturally over time. He's starting to make a lot of excuses. He's starting to sound very, very whingy. He's getting very personal at times with his players, you know, really calling them out. And that is never a particularly great sign, is it? So how can Thomas Tuchel really turn this around? Now, I thought that Chelsea have been at their best. Obviously, once they sacked Frank Lampard and they brought in Thomas Tuchel, he changed the formation. They went to a back five. And I thought Chelsea suddenly became one of the best teams, potentially, the best team in world football times at closing these spaces, sort of like the half spaces. They really forced teams to play differently. So, for example, I'm a huge Liverpool fan, and we played you guys 4 times last season. We didn't win any of the games. We drew home and away in the league, and obviously, we beat you guys twice in the cup finals, but on penalties. And they were the toughest games, probably potentially the 4 toughest games, barring the Champions League final, that we really came up against. And Thomas Tuchel, he just tactically was spot on. We couldn't play in these areas, get in between the centre backs, get out wide. We couldn't play in the areas that we want to do. And I found, or I would really compliment Thomas Tuchel, where I feel that he makes other managers and he makes opposition players play in a way that isn't natural to them, play in a way that they don't want to. He is obviously more of a defensive-minded manager than an offensive-minded manager, but that isn't necessarily the end of the world. He is brilliant at what he does. However, we've gone away from that now, or Chelsea have gone away from that now. We saw a few times in pre-season they went to a back four. Obviously, they got absolutely spanked by Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. Now, at the time, we were going, it's pre-season, doesn't really matter. However, Arsenal's form from pre-season has carried on at the top of the league, and perhaps Chelsea's form, inconsistent form from pre-season rather, has carried on itself. So I do believe that when Chelsea are at their best under Thomas Tuchel with these players, the tactics that he wants to implement, I think a back five is where Chelsea are at their strongest. Obviously, last night they played at a back four. I believe it was a back four against Leeds as well. I might be wrong with that, but I think Chelsea this season have tried to play a back four. Maybe it's because the loss of Rudiger, the fact that they haven't been able to bring Fofana in yet, although he is now, I think, officially, or he will be unveiled officially a Chelsea player either today or tomorrow. So it looks like Fofana, you guys won't have to wait long until you see Fofana in a Chelsea shirt. But let's look at the Chelsea lineup from last night. There are obviously injury problems at this moment in time at Chelsea Football Club. Although it is hard to feel too sorry for Chelsea at this moment in time. They do spend an awful lot of money. The youth setup is one of the best in world football. They've got some of the best young players in the world, and they're renowned over the last decade or so, just sending so many players out on loan without really the intention of bringing them in. So when you hear that Thomas Tuchel's upset that he's got injury problems, there is a lack of sympathy to a degree. But let's look at the team. Mendy in goal. Azpilicueta starts at right back because Reece James was missing. Thiago Silva, Koulibaly, Cucurella. So that's the back four. Loftus-Cheek and Jorginho as a midfield sort of. They played a 4-3-3, didn't they? So Loftus-Cheek, Jorginho, and Mount as the midfield three. Hakim Ziyech, who looks like he's really going to be on his way out of Chelsea, on the right. And then Sterling and Havertz, who, either one can sort of drift out wide or either one can play through the middle, but neither really being an out-and-out number 9. So you see a couple of issues for Chelsea straight away. Obviously, they don't have their number 1 right back. They're probably playing a formation that I don't think really suits this Chelsea team. Is Loftus-Cheek and Jorginho the best midfield options for Chelsea? I'd argue potentially not. Ziyech is leaving. Sterling is a fantastic player, and Havertz is obviously not a number 9. So there are some issues. And I found this just sort of randomly, just before I started the video. I went on to Twitter and I just wanted to get see an overall sense of how Chelsea fans are feeling, although Twitter isn't always necessarily the best way to gauge that. But I found this very, very interesting. This was someone sort of saying that these are the only players, these 7 players that they feel would be a guaranteed starter in this Chelsea team. So let's maybe have a little look at this and see what we could do. Obviously, Fofana's come in. You've got Thiago Silva, you've got Koulibaly. So this guy wants to go back to a back 5. I'd imagine that makes perfect sense. I'd imagine that Thomas Tuchel wants to go to a back 5 as well. Don't mind me. I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee from my Kit Kat mug. Disgusting. Right. So goalkeeping is a bit of an issue at this moment in time. Obviously, Kepa is not the most loved goalkeeper at Chelsea. Is he still the most expensive goalkeeper in world football? I believe he might be. He certainly was at the time when Chelsea signed him. He didn't prove himself, really, did he? I mean, he was a very, very young player when you guys got him. I'm sure he's had time to mature. We all remember the League Cup final where he refused to be subbed off. So Since then, Mendy's come in, and I think Mendy's done a really, really good job. So personally, I would go with Mendy. I know he's made a few mistakes at this moment in time, but I do believe that Mendy would be the best option for Chelsea going forward. This back three looks fantastic. But there's one player that I want to talk about. Obviously, we'll talk about Reece James, how good he is as right wing back. He is a world class player. I'm not interested in the comparisons between Trent and Reece James. They're both brilliant. So how about that? We'll just end that there. Both players are fantastic. And very similarly to Liverpool, although we play obviously Chelsea play probably more defensive than what Liverpool do, and you guys would play a different formation, ideally, the back five, whereas we traditionally play a 4-3-3. Tactics at times are a little bit similar. Our most creative, well, we don't have a number 10, so our most creative players are Trent on the right and Robertson or Shimikas on the left-hand side, depends who's playing. Those are our most creative outlets. And it was very similar to Chelsea last season. You had Reece James and you had Ben Chilwell. And actually, I think it was the injury that you got to both of these players, I think at the very same time, but obviously kept Chilwell out for a much longer period of time, unfortunately. But those two injuries really stopped Chelsea's progress last season. I think Chelsea were top of the Premier League table when it happened, top or thereabouts, and they were playing some of the best football actually in the country, and they looked like a stronger outfit than my team. I thought they were going to go toe to toe with Manchester City. I really thought that Chelsea could go on and win the title last season. So those two injuries really stopped Chelsea going forward. However, let's look at Cucurella. He cost roughly 70 odd million. I think it's about 67, so we'll round up to 70 million. And I'm not going to have a dig at Cucurella here. I'm not going to say he's a bad player. He's a very, very good player. You're not a bad player if you shine in this Brighton team under a fantastic coach and Graham Potter. And if Chelsea and Manchester City want you, you've got something about you. So I don't think it was a bad signing, especially after 5 games. I'm not going to say that. However, I do question the signing of Cucurella because, as I just said, Chilwell and James were your most creative players at times last season. A real outlet for Chelsea. Teams were really unable to go up against both Chilwell and James. And if anything, at times, Reece James is relied upon too much to be your most creative player and almost goal scorer is bizarre. I know that Ben Chilwell has injury problems, and I know maybe it's a little bit potentially could be a little bit naive to go into a season relying on injury-prone players. As a Liverpool fan, I know that all too well. Each season we go in relying on people like Thiago and Naby Keita to stay fit, and they're luxury players. So perhaps Ben Chilwell is a luxury player himself. However, you do have Alonso as backup, and I know that Alonso is not a superstar. I know that he's not the best player in world football. However, he can play left wing back. Actually, I would imagine that left wing back would be his best position. Certainly, he wouldn't be a solid option as left back, but as left wing back, he can be a real force for Chelsea. Areas of the pitch that Chelsea really needed looking at. Okay, you've brought in Fofana for a lot of money, but that looks like it's going to be a fantastic signing. You needed a centre midfielder and you need a striker. I think right wing, you could put Mount here. You could put Pulisic if he could stay fit. But if you could sort out the striker position, I think you could play Mount. The main position, I think, for me is really centre midfield and striker. Now, if we took Cucurella out of this situation and Ben Chilwell was here and you paid the 70 odd million for Cucurella, could you not, in a hypothetical world, have gone, or Todd Boehly or Chelsea, whoever's spending the money, gone, actually, could we potentially add another 15, 20 million onto that and offer it to West Ham, to Declan Rice? Go and slap 90 or 100 million on the table and say, we want him. It's all well and good, West Ham and David Moyes saying, 100 million pounds would get you one of Declan Rice's boots. It's all well and good saying stuff like that. But when a big bid comes in, more often than not, clubs will be tempted. So again, this isn't a dig at Cucurella, but I do question whether there was a need to sign someone for 70 million when you've got Ben Chilwell who can do this position. Look, Cucurella is a fantastic player. And if you hadn't signed Fofana, then potentially you could have had Silva, Koulibaly, and Cucurella as your 3 sort of centre-backs. I know you've done that with Azpilicueta in the past. And then have Ben Chilwell here. And then when Ben Chilwell, inevitably gets injured, you could then move Cucurella up and then bring in Azpilicueta or whoever that you've got in your squad. But I just think perhaps if you hadn't spent that 70 million on him, you could have used that money and added to it to go and get a Declan Rice. And then suddenly that midfield of Declan Rice and Kovacic becomes one of the strongest in the Premier League. And then obviously you've got N'Golo Kante, who can come in and out. Obviously, he's getting older, he's getting more and more injury prone, unfortunately. But you can then swap him with Kante when he's fit, with Jorginho And with Gallagher, with Conor Gallagher as well, who can play here. He could potentially play up here as well, Conor Gallagher. And then you could move Mount up here. And then the main thing is to go and get a striker. Now, obviously, I think one thing that was a little bit worrying, I thought, I'm not a Chelsea fan, I'm a neutral, obviously, but the interviewer sort of was questioning, I think it was for Talksport, and was talking about the transfer market and saying, basically, can you solve your problems in the next sort of 24 hours by just going out and signing a striker? Now, Thomas Tuchel, I would imagine that Chelsea will go and sign a striker. Look, they've spent a lot of money in this transfer window so far. They certainly won't be reluctant to. They've been heavily linked to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for 25 million. It's a stopgap, but the thing is, he scores goals, so he'll probably come in and he would be a very, very good signing for Chelsea. However, Thomas Tuchel, he didn't really talk about bringing in a striker. He seemingly dismissed the idea. I think the interviewer was saying it must have been frustrating for you because you're getting bodies in and around the Southampton box, but you didn't have that sort of quality to sort of break them down and get that second goal. Um, you know, I and Thomas Tuchel sort of seemingly dismissed that, sort of said, well, that's been an issue really ever since he's been here, but you can win games 1-0 or 2-0. Sort of obviously defending players like Havertz and Mount, who 5 goals between them, no goals, no assists. It's certainly not crisis level yet, but that's not the start that you want your most attacking players to really want. So he didn't sort of suggest Liverpool. He didn't suggest that Chelsea would go out and sign a striker. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. Chelsea obviously could go out and sign someone, but he seemingly he just seemed to dismiss the idea that Chelsea really needed a striker. And if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be a little bit worried about that. Perhaps it's because he had his fingers burnt by Lukaku. Obviously, 90 odd million it was for Lukaku. It did not work out. However, I would say that it wasn't the end of the world, or not the end of the world, rather. It wasn't the wrong thing to do. Now, what I mean by that is I don't think it was the wrong strategy to go out and sign a striker or to go out and sign a player like Lukaku. When he was at Inter Milan the first time around, he was a monster. And I made a video about a year or just over a year ago when Chelsea brought him in. And I look a bit of a mug where I sort of said, I think that Lukaku is the best striker in world football. And I genuinely believed it. I rated him higher than Haaland and Lewandowski and Benzema even. Maybe it was a bit of a shocking call from me. But I just thought, the size of the guy, he looks like a heavyweight boxer. Someone that size and structure shouldn't be able to move that quickly. He was a monster in the air. He was rapid. You give him half a chance, he's going to break the back of the net. I thought this guy would come back and smash goals left, right, and centre for Chelsea. Unfortunately for Chelsea fans, it didn't happen. But I don't think that was the wrong thing to do. I don't think it was the wrong thing to go and sign a striker and to go and sign a striker like Lukaku. I firmly believe that's what Chelsea needed, and I still feel that's what Chelsea do need going forward. The problem was the individual. Lukaku, unfortunately, we all know has a track record of falling out with managers, falling out with football clubs, being a bit of a nightmare behind the scenes. And, it seems like he's only ever seemed happy and comfortable at Inter Milan. That's his decision, and you have to respect that. But I don't think you have to come away from that and go, right, the whole decision to sign Lukaku was a nightmare. I think the decision to sign to him personally was poor, but the idea to go out and sign an out-and-out number 9, someone who could hold the ball up, bring others into play, was the correct decision. And I think it would do the world of good for someone like a Kai Havertz. I've mentioned that Mason Mount could play here, that a Conor Gallagher could potentially play here, or a Pulisic if fit. But actually, you could take out Havertz and you could put him here. And you can sort of get like these two to really sort of swap around. And if you go out and sign a striker, maybe an Aubameyang for this transfer window, but long term, go and sign someone, like a Lukaku. Could you potentially go and sign an Edin Dzeko for this season? A player like that, I think, would do the world of good. And the reason why I believe that, or actually, someone like an Olivier Giroud, who obviously they got rid of a little while ago. I'm not suggesting that Chelsea go out and sign Giroud, but a player like that, because I think it would bring Sterling and Havertz into the game more. Look, Sterling's doing pretty well, 3 goals in his last sort of 2 games, so he's obviously sort of hit some real form for Chelsea, which is what they need. But I think specifically for Havertz, he needs someone who he can play off. He's a top player. He's a really, really clever player, and I do feel for him. A lot of money spent on him. He's not an out-and-out goal scorer. He shouldn't be leading the line. I do feel bad for him, and although I feel bad for him, this is his 3rd season at Chelsea now, so he does need to prove himself. But I think to get the best out of him, Chelsea need to go and bring bring in another striker who can take that pressure off and allow Havertz just to float and just to, drop deep when he needs to, and also play on the shoulder. If a centre forward was to drop a little bit deeper, Havertz can sort of, break through the lines. I think he's a very, very good player, and Chelsea do need to stick with him because I think, if you bring in that striker, it will bring the best out of him. I'll leave it here. This is obviously, I don't want this to be too much of a long video, but obviously Chelsea are in a little bit of trouble at this current moment in time, but I don't believe they're in a massive crisis. I don't believe that sacking Thomas Tuchel would be the correct decision. However, Thomas Tuchel does need to up his game. Mauricio Pochettino is currently available. He's a more offensive style manager, and that might appease, Todd Bowley. It might appease the Chelsea fans more because, after a while, as much as everyone loves Thomas Tuchel, and I imagine the Chelsea fans really, really love this guy, he came in, won the Champions League, and he's made Chelsea very, very competitive again. Patience runs out. And right now, Chelsea are playing boring, lazy football. He's whining a lot. He's making excuses. He's digging out players. And that tends to never really end well, does it? One final point that I will make about Kai Havertz, I've just suddenly remembered. Why I think it's really important for Chelsea to go and sign a striker, not necessarily just an Aubameyang, not just for the goals, but someone who can hold up play. The reason why I believe it is very important for that is you look at France when they won the World Cup 4 years ago now in 2018. Olivier Giroud was kind of mocked because I don't think he scored throughout the whole competition. And yet I would argue he was one of the most influential players or the most important players for France throughout that tournament. Because without him, Antoine Griezmann wouldn't have had the tournament that he had had. Antoine Griezmann was brilliant throughout. And the reason why, he was able to play off a target man. He was able to play off someone like Giroud who could hold the ball up, bring others into play. If he was up top on his own, similar to, and I would say that they're kind of similar players, Havertz and Griezmann, certainly in structure and their style of play. If Griezmann was just left up top on his own, he doesn't get the goals, he doesn't get those moments, and France potentially don't go on and win the World Cup. It's that getting the best out of players. France managed to do it by putting Giroud and Griezmann together. I think Chelsea could do something similar. If they have a target man, someone up top who could bring Sterling and Havertz into play, and also the likes of Mount and Pulisic, when they come into play, I think it would solve so many problems at Chelsea Football Club. Obviously, I don't think they're going to sign a centre midfielder and a striker. So I would go out and sign a striker if I was Chelsea. Like I said, I don't want to dig out Cucurella. I think he's a very, very good player, but I do think that money could have been spent potentially on bringing in a centre midfielder, someone like a Declan Rice, who obviously Chelsea have been very, very keen on for a long, long time, and maybe given Ben Chilwell another season to really sort of prove his fitness and to prove his quality, because now you've got two very, very top options in Cucurella and Ben Chilwell fighting it out in the same position. And why that's good for competition, I think that money could have been invested elsewhere in the squad. But you may disagree with that. That's absolutely fine if you do. Let me know, guys, your views on Chelsea in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, then definitely give it a like, subscribe, and we'll see you very, very soon. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.